Well, welcome back to all of you that are following me on these Tuesdays. So here we go again. Um, as I promised last week, we're going to look at a couple animals. Animals that you probably don't know are on the island, and I guarantee you, most of the time you're never going to see. They're nocturnal mostly, or they come out in wet weather. So unless you're there at night in the rain, you're probably not going to see them. However, I have found them, which makes it interesting. They are there. I'm talking about a redback salamander. Now, the thing is, you probably have them in your backyard or the woods closest to you. They're all over the place. But when you start learning about them, they are, I was going to say fascinating, but they're beyond that. The next two animals I really don't understand, actually. Anyway, the redback salamander, it's an amphibian like most salamanders, frogs, toads, newts, and stuff like that. Now, an amphibian by its classification, very primitive, and the word means two kinds of life, and those two kinds of life is water and land. It starts out in water, a completely aquatic animal, and then becomes a completely terrestrial animal. And that's what, I mean, frogs tend to hang out in ponds, toads leave, but they live in both worlds, and that's what they are. Going back into evolution with these, they evolved from fish, and this was probably more than 300 million years ago. And I remember being up in Shippagan at the aquarium, and I was looking at this flounder, and it was on the bottom of the tank, two eyes on top, and just laying flat. I remember from childhood. And all of a sudden, it raised its eyes a little bit more than what they were. And on its fins, boosted itself up as if it was about to walk. And, you know, I'd never seen that. And I'm figuring, so it was maybe fish like this that, you know, and today we have mud skippers, which actually use their front fins to like legs, and they come out and bask in the sun for a while and they go back in the mud and water and things. So there's a lot of evolutionary evidence still around. And you have to look now. After 300 million years ago, we started to see amphibians and reptiles break off. Reptiles being pretty much terrestrial, but always using eggs, which go back to fish and amphibians. And then, of course, the reptiles evolved into birds, which still have the outside eggs as well, and a lot of other characteristics of reptiles. But this is the thing. They have these fins, fish, and we have a tendency to look at them as, well, that's a fin. But if you look at them microscopically, there's little bones in them. It's their feet. And that's where our hands came from. And our bone structures are pretty much the same. I mean, given a lot of time and evolution, but you can understand where our hands and therefore our feet as well came. Now, most amphibians come from eggs laid in the water, and then they become tadpoles. And you know this from frogs and toads. And then at a certain point, those little fins become feet. And you see actually evolution taking place. And then the tail is completely lost. And at a certain point, when the four legs now become big enough, well, it hops out of the water, which is kind of interesting. That's what an amphibian is all about, except for this one. It doesn't do that. In fact, this one never goes near the water, ever. It has remained terrestrial. It lays its eggs on land, usually under a rotting log or a rock or something like that. The female keeps the eggs very moist as if they were in water. And when the little salamanders hatch, they're not tadpoles, they're little salamanders. So there's a question here. Since it has no life in the water, it has no in tadpole stage, is it an amphibian? Or is it an offshoot of amphibians that show more reptilian characteristics, though not all, because, as you know from like a snake or something like that, it's got scales, it's a tough skin. Well, these guys have moist skin, and it has to stay moist or they're in trouble. Has no claws. They're very ugly kind of hands. Got a 3-chambered heart, like a fish. And it's cold-blooded, like a fish, like a reptile. So it's in this middle group, and yet it's running around the island. However, the weirdest thing about it is it has no lungs. I repeat, it has no lungs. It doesn't breathe like you and me, or a bird, or a reptile. It breathes through its skin, which has to stay moist in order for the pores to stay open, in order to bring that rain and high humidity and stuff close to it, and it absorbs the oxygen out of that. Amphibians don't do that, but this one does. So again, very, very strange. Now, amphibians have been around a very long time. I mean, long before the dinosaurs were even thought of, there were amphibians running around here, and they were big. I mean, we have amphibians that were 3 meters long. I mean, they were big. You didn't want to meet one. This little guy is no bigger than your finger. I mean, he's 2 or 3 inches, and that's about it. And that probably includes the tail. And yet, it's been noted by people who do this, since the end of the glacial period, which say 10,000 years, they have expanded their range. Now, keep in mind how small they are. They have expanded their range 80 meters per year. Doesn't sound like much. We can do that in a couple seconds, really. But, yeah, we're talking a little bit. The thing is, this particular species of salamander, the redback salamander, has a larger biomass. That means if you took all of them in the world and put them together, a larger biomass than all the birds, all the mammals, and all of us put together. This guy is tiny. Do you know how many are out there to be bigger than all the birds, all the mammals? I mean, think of a whale. Think of an elephant, just one. Think of a sumo wrestler, just one. Put them all together, and there's still more of these guys. So you gotta kind of wonder, just amazing. And it's the most, it gets weirder, it's the most abundant terrestrial vertebrate, like a dog, like us, living on land with a backbone, in all of Northeast North America. So where we live, if you want to say, well, what's the most productive animal out there? The white-tailed deer, the moose, the skunk, the rat, the mouse? No, the redback salamander. Absolutely amazing. And, I mean, the weirdness keeps going. In the fall, when kind of life is over, it hibernates like a bear. It has no claws, and yet it digs into the ground upwards to 1 meter. It has to be below the frost line with no claws and slimy skin and 3 inches long. I invite you to come to the island, maybe to witness this. I'm not certain. If you do find one, and I beg you, do not pick stuff up looking for them or anything, but if you happen to see one just walking around, leave it alone. Get down on your hands and knees and watch it for a while, but do not touch, please. They're very sensitive, and you could kill it. It has one function, though, in life, other than making redback salamanders, and that's being food for a garter snake. And that's actually how I found it. I was on the island, saw the garter snake, and followed it for a while. And then I was wondering, well, what is it doing here? And then I found redback salamanders. And when I looked it up, it's its main meal. So if you find garter snakes on the island, and there are, don't pick them up either. Don't follow them. Don't stalk them because it makes them nervous. Just watch them from a distance. Social distancing still. And you may find a redback. Good hunting. See you next week.